Hi, Roy here on my channel. Roy Reads Anything. One of the things I read is old magazines, and when we were on holiday came across two bound sets of something called the Windsor magazine, and this has given me an idea for a year and a bit long vlog of reading these, because it contains, amongst all the other contents of the magazines, it's got a novel called serialised novel Ayesha by H. Rider Haggard. So that's the sequel to She. So H. Rider Haggard wrote She, 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 She. And the sequel to that is Ayesha, which I've never read. So the fact that I can now read it in the first form it ever appeared in these magazines is quite appealing. So that's the plan, but I also want to look at all the other contents as well. Not necessarily reading every single article from, every word that's printed on the pages, but as I would with any other magazine, as if I was in 1904, 1905, getting my Windsor magazine, scanning the contents, reading the stuff that interests me, getting the latest bit of the serial as it arrives. That's the plan. So the Windsor magazine. So normally I've read Victorian magazines. We're now past the Victorian age. We're into the Edwardian period, I suppose. But the magazine is very much like the illustrated monthlies, like the Strand, Pearson's, and some others. So it's following. It's in a genre that had been created in Victorian times. So these are bound sets, which is a thing people did. Get a sort of, basically a book version of a 6 months worth of magazines that you could keep forever on your library. But just to see what an individual issue would look like. So here's a different Windsor magazine. So this is what you would get for your sixpence. So sixpence, little silver coin. The ones we Brits put in Christmas puddings. You get about 200 pages of material. So pretty chunky thing. Some stuff that isn't in these bound sets. Well, the cover for a start, that's a sort of wrapper. And it seems odd now, but the cover picture, always the same. Never changed. Every issue would have the same masthead, the same picture of Windsor Castle. What would change is obviously the date and the stuff they would print at the top about what's inside the magazine. So you get this identical cover. The back cover's fallen off of this one, which is why it's really cheap. Adverts. So the adverts aren't in the bound sets. Bongola tea. Tea, pianos, relish and jelly squares is what's advertised there. Then it looks as if the first page is blank, because what they're actually giving you at the very beginning of the magazine is a sort of free gift. A glossy print of a piece of art on thicker paper. So I guess the idea of the blank page is so you can take this out, pin it up, put it in your scrapbook, or even frame it, I suppose, without losing any precious content, because there's nothing on the back. So these are bound in the magazines I've got. Then you basically get the stories and articles, and at the back a whole load of more adverts. Beecham's pills. They advertised in every magazine I've ever seen from this sort of period. Not surprisingly, given that they would cure indigestion, bilious disorders, sick headache, poorness of blood, nervous debility and general want of tone. So, we all need some of them, I think. You also got your baking powder, Mrs. Beeton's cookery book, all sorts of crazy stuff. So that's what the magazines were like, and that's what somebody would be getting maybe from a W.H. Smith's newsstand on a station, or a stationer's shop. But like I say, I'm reading them in this form. So I will come back for the second half of this video once I've actually read the first issue, which was December. See, so the months are going to match up. It's December now. I'm going to read the December issue. I'll just have a little flick through now as if I've just bought it. So it's the Windsor magazine, an illustrated monthly for men and women. Published by Ward Lock, so they also publish books. So the sort of authors that they would be promoting and putting in the magazine will also be from their line of books, presumably. So if you haven't read Ayesha, but you have read She, and you want to read Ayesha, you could of course read along with me. Ayesha's easy to find. Project Gutenberg, lots of cheap editions. Even the Windsor magazine ones, you can get them on a database of scans called the Hathi Trust in America. So you either need to be in the US or use a VPN, I suppose, to look at those. But you could actually look at the same pages I'm looking at with my eyes, if you wanted to. But appreciate it as it's only the second book. You know, how many people are going to want to immediately jump onto that? Don't know, but do if you want. So I will be back when I've read this properly, sometime in December. So see you in a split second. Okay, so piling into the magazine. Start off with this print. The artist's called Breton Riviere, and the idea is St. George, he's slain the dragon and now he's exhausted while he's lying down, and his horse, let's just say his horse is having a nice lie down as well. I found the picture, like the painted, the colour version. I think it's in Tate Britain. Obviously it evolved a bit because in the final version there's no woman ministering to him and the background's a bit different. But that's the free picture for this month. Then you don't get any intro, you don't get the editor saying, and this month we've got this for you. You get straight into a story by Rudyard Kipling. Rudyard Kipling, he would have been probably at the height of his fame around then. Author of the Jungle Book and all sorts of patriotic poems and stories. This is some sort of comedy story. I could barely follow it, to be honest. There's that much kind of his sort of military and working class vernacular and almost slapstick type humour, but it has got motoring in it. So this car is a big feature, early days of motoring, something Kipling was keen on apparently. We've been to Kiplings House. Yeah. It's very nice. If we were forced at gunpoint to live in a National Trust house, that would be the one. Yeah, very nice. It's very lovely. It's also got its own flour mill, so for that vital surviving the zombie apocalypse sort of thing, it's pretty good. Okay, next thing is an article, Our Railways at Christmas. And this was actually really interesting. I know this book's falling to bits, that's why it was cheap. So check out the page layouts and the illustrations, something you get in these mags. So the thing is, at the time, I suppose railways were the main way people got about, for its people, for parcels, for things you haven't thought about, maybe like cattle. So it's sort of an article about how they cope at Christmas when there's huge demand. So have we thought about shop assistants? The weeks immediately preceding Christmas, especially trying, involving long hours of unremitting toil. And this class has not been overlooked in the railway company's arrangements. The Great Eastern Company, for example, runs special midnight trains on Christmas Eve to the principal stations on its system. Leaving Liverpool Street after 12 has struck, these trains speed through the eastern counties during the small hours of Christmas morning, carrying to their country homes or to the seaside hundreds of fagged-out workers whose weeks of weary toil are soon forgotten in that happy state of companionship and mutual goodwill of which Dickens writes so touchingly. So I feel Christmassy already reading that. It's quite a long article, actually. I mean, this would be great research for an author. You know, you could write a mystery story that depended on a detailed knowledge of these Christmas train arrangements. Here's something you might not have thought about when you're thinking about Edwardian railway journeys.
Like you do.
In connection with Christmas pantomimes, a large amount of special traffic comes upon our railways. Last year, the Great Northern Company alone carried about 500 artistes from London to appear in theatrical entertainments on Boxing Day in various provincial towns. And so great is the traffic in theatrical scenery and properties on this line, before the opening of the pantomime season, that a covered dock has to be set aside at King's Cross, specially for loading up theatrical freight. For the conveyance of the big sets, special open trucks, 45 feet long, are provided. So there you go. And next thing is the main event for me, Ayesha, the return of She. So I'll have to give mild spoilers, really. So stop now if you basically want to read H. Rider Haggard's She and this story. So in She, very briefly, two guys, Holly and Vincey, exploring in Africa, come across a hidden civilization ruled by an immortal queen called Ayesha, also known as She Who Must Be Obeyed. Furthermore, one of them, Vincey, who's described as a sort of godlike Adonis-like sort of young man, she thinks is the reincarnation of her lover from eons past. So plot ensues. At the end of that book, Ayesha is consumed in the flames of life that are supposed to be restoring her, but she seems to be withering away like an old mummy. And the guys barely escape with their lives. So a great adventure story. This was a big bestseller at the end of the 19th century. And now we're getting, for the first time, printed on this very page, the sequel. So it starts off, classic adventure story beginning, a bundle of manuscript, a manuscript in a parcel. Often the prelude to adventure. And what's happening is the two chaps miserably living in the Lake District because they're obsessed with Ayesha. You know, they've beheld the divine feminine, who said to them that she would see them in the future. So sequel ahoy. In fact, Haggard in his intro says it's not really a sequel, it's the second half. So it's a bit like the first two Tarzan books, where you could see it as one big novel, I guess. So they're miserable because, no, Ayesha, will we ever see her again? Should we just die? They get pretty extreme. But then Vincey has a vision. Check out this illustration. So here's Ayesha coming with a flame on her head. And basically giving Vincey, they're about 40 now, I think, giving him an idea of where she might be hanging out. So they set off on a quest. 16 years. Honestly, these guys are not lightweights in the being obsessed with Ayesha stakes. 16 years in the Himalayas, Tibet, growing beards, and By chapter 2, they've ended up at a llamasery, a place where llamas hang out. They take them in reluctantly at first, but they when they find out they know the score for Buddhism, they're keen to have them, and rumours begin to be heard of an immortal woman further off into the mountains. So, great start to Ayesha. Further chapters will unfold during next year. Then you get a little poem, and then, almost literally going from the sublime to the ridiculous, an article of cartoons, songs and singers in caricature. So, some funny art, and another detachable page. Then we get a story by Eden Philpotts. Know the name. He's actually got some fantasy shorter pieces in the Ballantine Adult Fantasy series, which I've talked about often. So 70s fantasy paperbacks resurrected some Eden Philpotts fantasy. This is actually a sort of comic pastoral story about a young tearaway comes to live with a chap. Then you get an epic poem by Irish writer Dora Sigerson Shorter. Heavy on the illustrations. A thing about art. So I put a little reminder there to myself to mention this guy's moustache. Check this out. Those of us who grew moustaches in Movember, what were we doing? We're merely on the foothills of moustaches compared to this kind of thing. So this artist, Edward J. Poynter, Baronet, President of the Royal Academy, paints lots and lots of historical and mythological scenes. Now this is 1904. You think about the cascade of revolutionary art movements that are just about to arrive in the 20th century. I guess this is the sort of thing they were reacting against. Detailed, realistic, historical paintings by a sort of pillar of society who's like knighted, made a baronet. This one's in Liverpool, apparently. We could go and see it in about half an hour, but we're not going to. But you're certainly getting your sixpence worth in terms of illustrations with the pictures. Another story, Knight Errant by H.B. Marriott Watson, is a romance. More illustrations, very different styles. You've got a big variety of drawing styles. That was quite good. Random picture of the sentimental type. There's a little child in the process of stealing some jam, and it's called Did I Hear Footsteps? Busted. Okay. In the Silence of Sleep Time by Ethel Turner is a small little crime thriller. A lot of in the Ayesha story, you've got visions, you've got mysticism, you've got vast adventure, you've got sort of exotic lands and fantasy. The other stories seem very tame. They're sort of they're basically cosy, happy endings so far, but it's early days yet. Because then we get an article about local rates and taxes. So what I've learned from this is that then as now, people complained about their paying their rates and what the money went on. Again, good research stuff, I guess, for authors. Interesting that people are still contributing to the poor laws, poor relief, where you're paying for not just the poor, but also lunatic asylums, registration of births, deaths and marriages, and vaccination. Yeah, and you've got your infographics and other sort of, let's take advantage of the fact this is an illustrated magazine. Another poem. A lot of the poems seem to be quite religious, generally speaking. This is December issue, remember, hence hark the herald angels sing. A cluster of angels outside a window. There's two little sleeping children in there. So you're getting religion. and sentiment at the same time. Then you get an E. Nesbit story, Edith Nesbit, most famous now for her children's stories, such as Five Children and It.
Railway Children.
Oh, the Railway Children, is that her?
Children, yeah.
Right. Incredibly prolific, wrote a lot of ghost stories too.
And was a prominent Fabian socialist, I do believe. Those of us who care about such things.
So this is a little romantic sketch, actually really well written, enjoyed reading that, of the same sort of order as the ones I've described. That's as far as I've got so far. Continuing, we get a story called The Cheat by Barry Payne. Barry Payne, what a brilliant name for an author. Sounds like a drummer in a punk rock band. Apparently wrote loads and loads and loads of stuff, including a bunch of supernatural stories. But this is just a little squib about cheating at cards, cheating at whist, and how it's done for all the best of reasons. So kind of cosy little story there. Sanctuary by Charlotte Mason is an article about the practice of people being able to get sanctuary in religious houses, with loads of pictures, loads of detail. Have to say, I didn't wake up thinking, I wish I knew more about how people used to get sanctuary in churches and cathedrals, but now I've read it, I'm glad I did. A Cast in the Dark by Hamilton Drummond is a crime-type story, historical, slightly queasy-making in that the villain is a sort of Fagin-like Jewish man. And then we get The Red Mark by Israel Zangwill, which is actually by a Jewish author. And it's set in the Jewish quarter of London. It's kind of a social realist story, a bit of a Cinderella type story about this young girl, Bloomer. And the plot revolves around fear of vaccination. So it's torn from today's headlines. Then we get another poem, More Water for Egypt, about a project to create a dam and a new lake. All the detail you could want about that. And yeah, plenty of detail. A Gamble in Whiskers by Frank Richardson. Not Frank Richards, even though it is a school story. Frank Richards created Billy Bunter and some other school characters. Frank Richardson, one of his claims to fame is he invented the phrase face fungus for beards, etc. And this story is about facial hair, although it doesn't feature the words face fungus, so I can only guess it's something he wrote about lots and lots. Maybe he was strangely obsessed with it, like the Mad Hatter in Batman is obsessed with hats. Concerning Rotters is another sort of humorous school story. Then we get another serial. So most of the fiction is short stories, but you've got two serials, one being Ayesha, this other one, If Youth But Knew, which is a romance. So there's two serials to sort of keep you buying month after month, as well as knowing you're going to get lots of new stuff as well, which is kind of how these magazines tended to roll. Christmas Eve, bear in mind, December issue, you've got a little quote from Shakespeare, the sentimental picture of some little cherubs. Christmas Eve, The Lone Hand by H.C. Bailey. H.C. Bailey went on to be quite a well-known detective author in the golden age of detective fiction. But this is a historical tale. Again with the illustrations. Herons and Heronries. Another thing I didn't wake up thinking, I wish I knew more about herons, but no, I'm not, I'm as interested in them as anyone.
I think you're being a bit slack there.
Well, yeah. Well, now I know lots and lots about herons, and I really like this picture. I think it's a fantastic print. They're sort of uncanny, aren't they?
They are. They're always bigger than you think they are.
They're like
Got
dinosaur
that
birds.
kind of pterodactyl neck, bendy, thingy, bobby.
As we can see, yeah.
They're huge.
They are huge. Well, look at a purple heron's egg. Huge. The Other Man's Story by Fred M. White. He wrote a series of 6 short stories concerning disasters happening to London. They're collected as the Dooms of London. But this isn't that. This is a ironic little tale set in the world of casinos and gentlemen's clubs. So I sort of get the feeling that there's lots of these writers wrote interesting things, but not here. This is how they got their bread and butter, writing little stories for magazines, I suppose. Finally, magazine finishes off with the editor's scrapbook, which is a bunch of jokes and cartoons. And
those Victorian jokes.
they're those Victorian jokes that you had to be there, really. Also, when it says scrapbook, they've got a point, because these aren't new jokes. So this one, for instance, husband, these biscuits are somewhat heavy, my dear, don't you think so? Wife, that's funny. The cookbook says that they should be light. Now, this is 1904, and I did a search on that. I found 4 instances of it in newspapers dating back to 1893. So 11 years before. A joke like that, you know, well, that's what I learned to do.
I know.
As for, can you change a sovereign, asked Cadley. Certainly, returned the druggist courteously. How'll you have it, in quinine pills or cough drops? That one dates back to 1892. So, scissors and paste approach there, which was not uncommon, and that is the end of that magazine. So the blank page signals the start of the January issue. I'll get to that in January. I think based on that, I'm revealing the horror that is my table. This is what's behind. Oh dear! This is what's behind the scenes.
You're ruining the effect.
Yeah, no, I've spoiled the magic now. Yes, I'm stoked about Ayesha. I'm cautiously interested in the fiction, but I might not. If I find something really interesting, I'll tell you about it. And the non-fiction articles can be pretty cool as well, you know, all herons, rates, taxes, that kind of thing. Sanctuary, yeah. Oh. Well, yeah, imagine if you were fleeing a heron, fleeing an angry heron, you could seek sanctuary in a cathedral. Or if you were fleeing the local sheriff because you hadn't paid your local rates and taxes, perhaps more likely, and they'd set the herons on you. Unleash the herons! The herons! Oh dear, time to go.
Oh, collapse of stout party.
Bye everybody.